Hi, I'm George Norrie, and welcome to our Coast to Coast AM YouTube channel. Have fun, tell your friends, and share us with everyone. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Coast to Coast AM's mobile app. And always remember to log on to our website at coasttocoastam.com for daily articles, the best paranormal information, and all you need to know about your favorite guests. And now you can become a Coast Insider directly through the Coast mobile app. We welcome our international listeners and even offer a free 2-week trial. So don't delay. Become an insider today.
We're talking about the Black Knight satellite. Billy Carson is the auteur behind a new doc about that. You can link up to him at coasttocoastam.com. But I want to go back. I got an interesting... a friend who I talk with from time to time sent me an email, and he said, Coast to Coast did a show on this, or at least touched on this before, and it went in a very different direction. And I'll share that with you and get Billy's reaction to that next on Coast to Coast AM. This is Ian Punnett. Billy Carson is the producer-director behind this new documentary about the Black Knight satellite. He said here that the what you are saying, and I think this is interesting, about our home being Upsilon Boötes. Is that how you pronounced it? It's spelled Bootes, but it's Boötes?
Yes, I'm here. Epsilon Boötes.
Okay. Thank you. That it's a double star. He said, quote, "We live on the sixth planet of 7 coming from the sun, which is the larger of the two. Our sixth planet has 1 moon. Our fourth planet has 3. Our first and third planets each have 1. Our probe," and he goes on to talk about it, about the maps, kind of what you were referring to. But then what he said was that the original author of this theory was this Scottish guy named Duncan Lunan, who then later disavows it and says, he was completely wrong. There is nothing that connects this to the Black Knight satellite, and that it was going on bad science. And so where are you with that?
That's a great thing. That's why we have Duncan Lunan in my documentary.
Okay,
and
talk
nobody
about
has
that.
been able to get to him. Yeah, Duncan Lunan's in the documentary. He was under a lot of pressure from some really high-up people to disavow his original discovery. Now, in 1953, several independent ham radio operators had come up with the same deciphering of the signal, which led them also to Epsilon, and where it was in the sky approximately 11,000 years prior. Duncan Lunan comes up with a number around 13,000, and he stands by his statement now within our documentary that he even had more information, but he was forbidden to publish it in Time magazine. As you know, his article made Time magazine in 1960 about the Black Knight satellite and the fact that this signal had given up a location of Epsilon Boötes. And after having a lot of pressure on him much later to disavow the statements that he had made, now, he's an older guy now. He's not worried about anybody coming after him. And he's in our documentary. We didn't pay him one penny, $0 paid, zero. We sent somebody out to his house in the UK, and we did an interview with him right there. And he says that there's even more that he wasn't able to say, but he stands by his word.
But he stands by his previous word, not his retraction, which said that he had made outright errors and his methods had been unscientific.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting about this is there's a document from the NSA that uses the same method, and this NSA document, which is entitled Communication with Extraterrestrial Intelligence, comes up with the Epsilon Boötes, and this is also in the documentary.
So I want to go over, if I can, some of the details we were talking about. So the concept here is that there is a series of references to an object, and that whereas you and others may tie them together, they just may all exist as separate phenomenon, but you see them as being interconnected. One of those is the fact that in 1899, Tesla had, in fact, received what he said were were radio transmissions from a place which he presumed to be something like Mars. But at the time, and I'd love to get your response to this, nobody knew about pulsars. Nobody knew what they were. And that's very likely all that he had come across was he was an early discoverer of that, 60 years before they became public knowledge.
Quite possible.
But you don't think so?
Well, my documentary raises a question.
Okay.
It raises questions is what the documentary does. It raises a lot of questions, and it puts together a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and it paints a picture. Now, in my opinion and my hypothesis, based on enough circumstantial evidence, I believe that this is all pointing to something very similar, or one object, which, or maybe even more than one object, as some people have claimed, that seem to be up there orbiting Earth. Right. And that's what the documentary is about. But it raises the question, and it lets people come up with their own hypothesis for themselves.
Right. And that sometimes that's, we can always do that. We can always kind of throw stuff out and hope that people will watch it. In this case, you can watch the video and more at forbiddenknowledge.tv. You can find out more by linking up to Billy Carson through the website. And I've been, like I said, and I'm so grateful that you agreed to come on. There was a History Channel thing years ago about the Black Knight satellite, and I'd seen that when it had originally run. And I've always been kind of curious about this, and was sort of waiting for somebody to do something definitive about it, because if this is out there and it's not space junk, then it's something. And if it's something, why can't we know what it is? If it's terrestrial, then maybe we'll never know because it's classified. But if it's not terrestrial and it's outside of our atmosphere, then we're left to do what you do here and what we've been talking about on Coast to Coast, which is to kind of surmise or to extrapolate from known data where you think that goes. So as we look at the Black Knight satellite, do you think right now they're just gathering data on us, whoever they are? Do you have a sense of why they would be so worried about us being so far away, though, from this home planet that you refer to?
Yeah, well, technology allows you to close distances, vast distances, very quickly, especially if you're a million years more advanced than another species. Look where we came from with 100 years, coming from a horse, buggy, and carriage to putting remote control cars on other planets now. And so I think that they most likely would use, and we talk about this, we hypothesize about this in the documentary with an actual quantum physicist and an astrophysicist. Most likely they would be using quantum entanglement. So through quantum entanglement, you can communicate through vast distances, bypassing the speed of light, because quantum entanglement is instantaneous communication between atoms. And so if they've got that advanced technology, it's quite possible they could be transmitting that. Now, if you look at the myth of Adapa, a very famous tablet, it's talking about Adam from the Bible. This is before the Bible, though. And it's talking about the fact that Adam had been created higher than the Anunnaki themselves, that whatever they did with this Homo sapien, that it talks about the fact that he would even be able to rise up even higher than them, and that all the wisdom and knowledge of the universe was programmed into his body. And so if you're a race of people that have created or at least you feel like you're outnumbered, let's say, by billions of people, millions and billions of people, now there's billions, and they are advancing at an extremely fast pace because you've engaged their civilization, which is now tainted it and sped up the process of evolution technologically, then you would be very concerned. There's many, many texts in Sumerian tablets that talk about the concern of human beings advancing past them or being able to rival them. And so that would be a very good reason to want to monitor and watch and see, are they developing weapons that they can take into space? Are they able to travel at a percentage of the speed of light? Have they figured out how to create a warp drive or EM drive? All these things are great questions. Right. And if you're a civilization that's worried about potential rivals in the future for fighting for space resources, you'd want to watch and see what level a species is at.
Well, this idea of space resources is very valid. I mean, we all know that there's, if nothing else, mining for minerals projects and other profit-driven motives, the possibility of a separate colony somewhere has been floated around for decades. But mostly, if I were somebody that was looking at this planet from a million miles away, I'd be looking at it going, no worries there, because these people are they're entertaining themselves to death. And they just.
But we're advancing still fast.
Yeah, the education's breaking down. All they want to do is make videos and talk about each other and take pictures of their food. There just isn't any pressing need, it would seem, for that great next knowledge leap, except if that next big knowledge leap somehow made social media something you didn't even have to raise a finger for, but you could do it through, batting your eyes or twinkling your nose or something. That's the next big development. In which case, I would think, what do they care?
Right. Well, I think that they're watching not us, meaning the people who are just the basic population, but these governments that have running these black budget projects and these space projects and these, the X-33B, for example, the X-33B goes into space for 754 days at a time. They could be watching things that we're not even privy to, black budget, top secret DARPA projects, weapons that are being put into space, like the rods from God, where you can drop a tungsten steel rod on a city and destroy the entire city without any nuclear fallout. They're looking at that type of stuff.
Talk to me about that. I don't know that theory.
There's a device called the rods from God. This was a DARPA project. It's a satellite that holds 20-foot tungsten steel rods, no warhead at all on them. It could be located and placed over the satellite itself can be put over any country. And with pinpoint precision, they'll release a tungsten rod that literally uses kinetic energy, and it will drop within meters or centimeters of the location where they want to target. And just through kinetic energy will completely implode that entire area, leaving no nuclear fallout because there's no warhead at all. It's just a kinetic energy weapon.
It's a hammer.
Yeah, a hammer. A Thor's hammer.
Yeah. And it just, you would hammer something, and it just like if you were hitting a hammer on on a stone or on concrete, you'd destroy the integrity of that, so that even what you didn't destroy at first with one blow of the hammer later on could be destroyed by purely natural, freeze and thaw cycles and everything else that would happen after it. Yeah, that's very. I've never heard that theory. Is that something that actually got off the ground, if you pardon the term?
Yeah, it's already done. This, the rods from God. It's already a real project that already exists.
Yeah, when you say real project, but I mean, where is it? Where is that? Because I would be really concerned about rods from God.
Yeah, well, it's available online. I mean, you can actually look it up. It's a DARPA project.
Okay, all right. Yeah. I'm going to go to the questions early because there's a lot of people interested in this, and we'll do it at the bottom of the hour. Billy Carson is the expert on this secret space program, the Black Knight satellite. I'm impressed that you, as a producer and a director, went back to Duncan Lunan. How did you know to go back to him and get him to talk about the fact that he now says he had been silenced?
Well, through my research, I had found out that Duncan Lunan had come up with this deciphering of the signal, and yes, I found out that he had later went back on his word. But if you look at the history of the military and the government and what they do to people who are coming forth with information, they go back and they silence them or make them change their story. Even the government themselves changes their story, just like in the 1947 incident at Roswell. So I decided to see if I can find him and see if he would be willing to talk and speak on it. Now that he's much older, I mean, what is there to fear now?
Right?
And he was willing to talk.
And he hints that there is more, but he did not say what that more is on your documentary. Right. Okay.
Correct.
You will probably disagree about this, but or perhaps I think a lot of people have a lot more faith in government or people than I do. I don't think the government went back on its word in 1947. I know why you use that expression, but I just think it just always points back to human ineptitude. We're always just kind of figuring stuff out in real time, and we say something, and then we realize, oh, that was wrong. And, all you can do is just go, oh, no, I was wrong. But there's also this concept that exists that when it comes to government especially, that they should always be measured against perfection. Like somehow just being in the government makes them more than, or however you want to look at it, less than human, that they don't do the same stupid stuff that we all do, which is make up a story to cover something else. So would you say, if you had to put percentages on this, what percentage do you believe is likely true that the Black Knight satellite is space junk, that the Black Knight satellite is an NSA project or a spy satellite from another country that we don't want to admit is out there or has capabilities, or the percentage that you think the Black Knight satellite is linked directly to an ancient culture and is used as a monitor for Earth?
I would say about 75%. I believe it's used ancient culture that's used it as a monitor for Earth to watch over mankind.
Okay, and your confidence in that. Do you? I know that we were discussing some of the timeline for that earlier, and if people missed it, they could go back and listen to that on Coast to Coast. But other than the timeline of that, is there anything that you've been able to determine as being indicative of that type of microscope over us from the Black Knight satellite? Is there anything that we have in the objective scientific record that says what it has done, or things which is beyond conjecture?
No, this is conjecture. When I say, we hypothesize in the documentary what types of communications could they possibly be using if it is an object up there that's watching us. How would they communicate over vast distances? A little bit more about Epsilon. One of the amazing quote from Michio Kaku, the theoretical physicist, the world-famous author and theoretical physicist, was that there's a void in Boötis, and this is a well-known void. It's called the Boötis void in astrophysics. It's a space of about 168 million light years of total empty space in the constellation that is completely void of even space dust. And theoretical physicists like Michio Kaku have made bold claims that it appears to be an advanced cloaked civilization, and that's also in the documentary.
He was on tonight, not on this show, but he was on a replay that we often have before we go on the air. Michio was on with Art Bell, and I don't think he was talking about that in particular, but he has a long connection to this program, obviously. Let's go first-time caller line. Dan is in Indiana on Coast to Coast AM for Billy Carson. Go ahead, Dan.
Hello. I find your show very interesting tonight. Mr. Carson, I'm looking forward to seeing that documentary. I was just wondering, when you mentioned the pyramid a while ago, I just noticed once I was studying quite a bit about the Pyramid of Giza, and you have noticed that the first two letters of the word is pi, and they use pi to design the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the next two are Ra, R-A, the god in Egypt. The light, it means light. And then mid, right. It's like it's saying numbers and Ra, or numbers and God rule the Middle Earth. That just kind of stuck out at me after, sitting and just looking at it, saying, what could this word possibly mean? I know pyros refers to fire or energy, but anyway, I just threw that out there. And also on the builder or designer of the pyramid, we have somewhere in Egyptian history, they refer to a guy named Thoth the Atlantean, and they say he designed it. And then you have the Hebrews say that Enoch did. And then the Greeks say Hermes Trimethra. So you have three different names probably for the same person. But it's really interesting. And Mr. Sitchin, some of the things that he's talked about tonight, Mr. Sitchin also talked about the Sumerian cuneiform tablets.
Right.
And I just want to say I really enjoyed the show, and I didn't know if y'all had ever noticed that correlation between that word pyramid. But y'all have a good evening, and I'll turn the radio up and listen.
Thank you so much,
Thank
sir.
you.
Yeah. I mean, it's what we call them, right? There's no sign that says these are the pyramids, but that was the Greek word for them. What are you connecting to with what he said?
Well, the most important thing, I think, is that what he said was the correlation between the individuals that claim to have built the Great Pyramid, starting off with Thoth the Atlantean. He was an Atlantean priest king, ruled over the land of Kem, pre-dynastic era for 14,000 years, according to the Egyptians. And in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, he claims to have built the Great Pyramid. He says, builded I the Great Pyramid, patterned after Earth's force, so that it too might remain through the ages. And then this same guy seems to show up over and over again throughout time, at various different names of also being the same person.
Right. I had always understood that the Greek word that is the core of what we call pyramid, it was a reference to the shape of it, and that it came from the what was it, like a wheat cake or like a bread of sorts, and that's how they made their bread, this sort of what we would call a pyramidal shape. But that's why they're called that. It was after what they would have eaten, some sort of cake, and that's what they saw when they saw that design. Is that something you've come across?
I haven't come across that, no. Just the only teaching that I've come across with the Great Pyramid is that tetrahedron. It's a tetrahedron, the Great Pyramid itself, tetrahedron, and that it's a 43,200 scale of the Earth. So if you scale it up 43,200 times, it fits directly inside the circumference of the Earth and touches each point.
All right. Okay. Cool. All right. Let's go to Blair in Phoenix on Coast to Coast AM for Billy Carson. Go ahead, Blair.
Season's greetings, Ian and Mr. Carson. And by the way, Ian, excellent open lines last night. Very enjoyable.
Good. Glad you did. Thank you.
Jim Mars, I had the pleasure to meet him about 20 years ago. He wrote the book Alien Agenda.
Yeah.
And Mr. Carson, regarding your thesis about the power of Adam, well, if a theory that's going around in my circles, Adam and Eve were biological uplifters that prematurely mixed with some of the native evolutionary humans, whereby Eve conceived Cain, the ultimate half-breed, resulting in a physical/spiritual quarantine being initiated, where Jim Mars in his book Alien Agenda quotes near stationary orbiting satellites in place having to do with, quote, quarantine monitoring. So what's the term quarantine mean in your theory, sir?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something in my research as well. And I met Jim Mars as well, so the late, great Jim Mars, rest in peace. But quarantine meaning, in my opinion, just based off of the text and the research that I've done, that this Eden that they had was an actual outdoor laboratory. These satellites could be, or whatever was up there, could have been something that was monitoring from above and keeping track of the movements, because this garden was a very, very huge place. It wasn't like a barn, in my opinion. I think it was a pretty big place.
If people want to catch Billy Carson's research, you can do that by linking up to him at coasttocoastam.com. I think he would be doing Jim Mars proud tonight. Cynthia's in Massachusetts on Coast to Coast AM. Cynthia?
Hi. I was talking, interested in the pyramids. Basically, I felt history presented itself that the people were struggling to get the pyramids constructed, and as each one died along the way, they kept replacing them, but I don't know how they completed it. without any spiritual help. I feel that there must have been some spiritual help involved in the process, because that endeavor would have been impossible for the population to construct by themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of evidence that shows that if they were to use ramps and things like that, there would have been more mass and mud than the pyramid itself. And a lot of the other hypotheses that have been used and have been tried don't seem to be able to create a masterpiece like the Great Pyramid, for example, something that you can drop a block in place, a massive megalithic block in place every few minutes with precision. So they definitely had some help. And in my opinion, the master architect of the Great Pyramid is Thoth, Thoth, the Atlantean priest king. He's also known as Hermes Trismegistus. He's known as Quetzalcoatl, Lord Pakal, Viracocha, Kukulkan. He's got many, many names over the eons. In the tablets, he's told by his father, Ea Enki, to go over to leave Africa and go over to the Americas. See, they didn't use the word Americas, but they talked about another region of the planet, and I believe that was the Americas, because in Teotihuacan you see a replica of the three pyramids at Giza with the potential alignment of Orion. And what's interesting is the base of that pyramid is exactly the same dimensions of the base of the Great Pyramid at Giza, and the height of the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan is 50% the height, exactly 50% of the height of the Great Pyramid at Giza. So what it tells me, and there's also, it's built on top of an aquifer, and some other similar construction techniques were used. So what it tells me is there's one architect, one master architect, and it may have been this Thoth. Now, he didn't build these pyramids with his own hands. Obviously, the instructions or the overseeing of them being built by people was done, but I believe that the technology, the know-how, and the architectural floor plan was given out by this one person.
I think we have time. I think we can get to another person hanging on for Billy Carson. Carl is in Boston on Coast to Coast AM. Carl? Oh, he dropped? Okay, we got Jazz in Long Beach, west of the Rockies on Coast to Coast.
Hello?
Hey, yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
Oh, wow. I just wanted to say real quick, there's something serious I've heard on YouTube by a website called Suspicious Observers, and it's talking about the world's axis turning and basically the magnetic polar shifts or something like that, and that the ocean will basically wash away, like the West Coast, at least, and other continents we're all gonna, this thing about the sun letting loose this power, or this it's a scientific mumbo jumbo, and I'm not sure if we're aware, if the world's aware of this, that this polar shift is going to take place. And it sounds like this guy knows what he's talking about, but the website's called Suspicious Observers. If you just check it out, it sounds like this guy really...
Okay. Are you familiar with that, Billy?
Well, I'm familiar with pole shifts. I mean, but when I first started talking online, I was talking about pole shifts. Pole shifts of the crust of the Earth, and also a pole shift of the magnetic field. We're going through a magnetic field shift right now. True north, magnetic north used to be pointing towards North Star. Now it's actually over Russia and moving very rapidly. Even airports have had to realign the coordinates to their landing strips because of it. That's well known and well documented. The crust of the Earth has had shifts in the past where that's how come Antarctica has moved into the location it's at. That's a pole shift of the crust. But in my personal opinion, based on my research, we're probably somewhere around 200 to 300 years away from maybe having another slippage of the crust that massive or something similar happening. But, however, I've already prepared myself because, if you know, the original show I was on the History Channel, they were covering me because I built an underground city named Fort Terra Nova, the size of 3 Walmarts underground, to withstand any type of a geological disaster.
What is the status of that these days?
It's completed. It's been completed since 2013, and
Do you live there?
360 people can go down there, but it's just on standby right now.
Do you have do people? I mean, this is dead on serious question. Do you know who those 360 people will be?
Yeah, we've already taken psychological evaluations, health exams, and we have to renew those from time to time. There's a 7,000 person waiting list for people that fall off, die, or can't get, for whatever reason, can't do it. And I'm going to build a second shelter as well. We're looking for a new place right now. I'm going to hire a new geologist and build one even a little bit more advanced. The one we have now, we're going to actually empty out all the food and redo all the stored food, because now with all the glyphosate and gluten, what do you call that stuff now? We're finding out that stuff is in there in the wheat, so we have to replenish now the whole 1 year supply with the food for everyone, but we're working on that now. But yeah, it's a big project. There's 100 acres of land on top so that we can mine it in case we come out and, we have to start fresh. Front load tractor and all that's down there. It was a $20 million project.
How do you what's your plan? This is going to sound awful, okay? So I'm a little sometimes suspect about human nature, and I see repetitions in history, particularly through even early American history. But I also know that there is something about our psyche that feels the need to try to always, by and large, not always, but in the larger the group gets, the more likely there are going to be people who want to dominate, want to control, right? And then they're going to want to punish and or create laws on people so that there's always somebody that's disempowered or marginalized. When we come... I want to get back to the subject. We're going to give the numbers again coming up in just a second. I'm really fascinated by that, Billy, because I'd like to know what you plan on doing in the event that this should happen and you've got 360 people that move underground. How will you police that? And what are your expectations for what would happen if there was an insurrection? What was your plan for law and order?
Well, we have, first of all, it's a very strict psychological evaluation to get into, to be able to even get in an interview process is extensive. Also, everyone who's a part of the shelter is a part of the community. Everyone has their own job. In other words, we have a dentist, we have a doctor, we have scientists, we have teachers, we have security trainers to train people in self-defense. We have turbine diesel engine generator mechanics who would help with the motors. All that. It's just so much. Every single person actually serves a purpose to the community. Originally, I was going to create one just for myself and my family, and I realized I don't know everything. I would need help, so I decided to create a community. Right. So it's set up in that way. There's a huge rule book everyone has to go by. There's nobody ruling over anyone, although there are basic rules that we have to have in place. There's different types of special type of clothing we have to have on to protect the air ventilation system and everything. But it's a pretty elaborate system. Could there be an insurrection or an uprising or something like that? It's possible. I mean, we're dealing with people. Yeah. But I think there's enough checks in place and enough people that are on the same frequency that I think we'll be okay. If it even comes to that, we may never use it.
No, you absolutely captured my imagination on this. Yeah. So, weapons? Will the people be allowed to bring in weapons?
No, they're not allowed to bring in weapons, although we do have a cache of weapons in the facility to utilize in case we have to defend ourselves against an outside force. When things get rough and tough, and sometimes people get rough and tough. And so if there's meager food and water supplies on the top and they find out where we're at in some weird kind of way, which would be hard to do, but if they did, we'd have to protect ourselves.
And where generally is this located?
We can't give the precise location because that's top secret only for the members, but it is in northwest Georgia. You have to be 700 miles away from coastline, 700 feet at least above sea level, or higher, which we are, on a gradual incline. Can't be on any fault lines. Can't be downwind from any volcanic activity. Can't be within 40 miles of any nuclear power plants. Sure. You can't have argon gases and so many different types of gases in the strata. A lot of work and research went into it.
I'm sure there was. It sounds like up around the Ringgold area, because there were already a lot of mines up there back when I think they were pulling gold out of. That was one of the early gold rush locations, was in North Georgia. So I don't know. That's my guess. What do you call it?
Fort Terra Nova. Terra. You can go to the Instagram account, Fort Terra Nova. You can see some of the construction process, some of the final interior process with people actually in, when we're looking around. It's townhouse style living underground.
Okay, that's fascinating. I guess you couldn't call it Carson City because it's already taken.
It's already gone.
All right, let's get back to callers who are standing by. Let's start with first-time caller line. Joe is in New Jersey for Billy Carson on the Black Knight satellite. Go ahead, Joe.
Yes, I'm in what they call Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It's part of Camden County. I was listening
right
to
near
this
Philadelphia.
Yeah, and right across. Right, he was talking about what do you call it? That one where the planes disappeared in 1947.
You're talking about? No, I think we were talking about
Roswell.
We were talking about Roswell earlier. Right?
Yeah, that's it. Well, I was a year old back then. I was living in Audubon, New Jersey, which is part of Camden County, and my father was a ham operator, by the way, W2EQ. Well, he was. There was a guy by the name of Philip Lindsay, and he wrote a book about the human history, and he had 4 root races, and the first one was called the Polarians, and they communicated with their minds, and there was no borders at that time. And then the second group, they looked like cavemen. They were called Hyperboreans. And then the third group, the people from Morris, they were, what do you call that? They have 2 sexes instead of 1 sex. And they had like a middle eye. Then came the people from Atlantis. And apparently the ones from Atlantis were the ones that started the pyramids. And the people from the Morris are the ones that started, like they have like these statues or so on the Easter Islands. So I wanted to tell about that. And they never mentioned, for some reason, the first dynasty of Egypt. The guy's name is Menes. They never mentioned that. And I wonder why.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not sure that falls in Billy's wheelhouse, but go ahead, Billy.
That's pretty interesting. I mean, I do agree with one thing, that the Atlanteans are responsible for building of the pyramids, or at least laying down the architectural floor plan of how to build pyramids all around the earth, because I believe that the Atlantis that people know of as the Ring City was just one capital of many capitals on Earth, and that everywhere on the entire planet Earth was Atlantis, because Atlantis was a global civilization, which is why you can find the similarities between construction techniques and megalithic structures all over the world.
Jerry, west of the Rockies in Vegas on Coast to Coast. Jerry?
On.
Go ahead.
What I wanted to do was just make a comment. I had watched a documentary on the cable about the abductions in Nome, Alaska. And in fact, during one of the abductions, there was a recorder on, and they recorded Sumerian voices on that recording. So I believe that the Sumerians are still around.
Well, it's possible. I mean, if you read I went to the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, England, a few months ago, and I went there specifically to look at the Sumerian Kings List, which is a list of kings that ruled over Earth before the Great Flood swept over the land. And we're talking about massive times that these guys ruled. One man would rule for 28,800 years. Another one would rule for 14,000 years. Another one would rule for 7,800 years. I mean, the years of rulership, of kingship, were just incredible lifespans. And so, to me, just that alone is enough for me to believe that these people had the capability of extending life, or maybe even learning how to clone themselves and transfer consciousness. Various different ways it could be done, but in some way they had mastered it. in my opinion.
Yeah, what's interesting about that, I hear this, there's a similar argument that's made about when ages are given in the Bible, that it was a way of expressing, it was a nuanced way of expressing holiness or a kind of a divine spark or something that people were identified as having lived these extraordinary lengths of time. And so that's how I kind of hear something like that. But you think this is a believable factual record that would say somebody
they specifically say they base it on shars, and a shar, according to the ancient Sumerians, is 3,600 years, and so these shars basically break down the years. And when you add the shars together, you get the total amount of years of kingship, and that's how it's laid out. And so they're basing it on a specific number. They didn't mention anything spiritual or etherical or anything like that. They're basing it on an actual number of orbits around the sun. And they specifically named, like Alulim, he ruled for 28,800 years. Alajar ruled for 36,000 years. And they're basing it on shars, which are the cycles of time that they base things on.
Joe is on a wild card line on Coast to Coast in Maryland for Billy Carson. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Ian. Hi, Mr. Billy. How you guys doing tonight?
Great. Go for it, man.
Good. The Black Knight satellite, that's like 15 tons, correct? And it's been in orbit about 15,000 years, right?
Yeah, they're estimated between 11 and 13,000 years based on the alignment of the
11 and 13.
solstice. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, we don't have the capacity, I don't think, to launch a satellite that big, and also for it to be so long, to come from on the Earth before, or from an alien race, because we don't have that capacity. Plus, it's still sending off signals. So it's kind of like when you see on Star Trek, Q is with watching over Picard, and he goes, "We're watching over you humans to make sure that you keep doing things right." So, Mr. Billy, you think honestly that is extraterrestrial, right?
That's my personal opinion based off of my research and everybody that I've talked to in the 20 incredible researchers and scientists in the documentary. I've come to the conclusion that this object is up there and is there to monitor and watch us, and that it could be transmitting all of our technological accomplishments and our blunders back to some location. To what end? That question I can't answer, but I do believe that we're being watched. And if you look at the tablets, and these people, if it really is the all-seeing eye, it could be that, again, these people are really concerned about us becoming more advanced than them and becoming a rival. They like to create breakaway civilizations, and if we're a rival, we may want to invade some locations or some resources that they have access to that they don't want us to be privy to. That's just a possibility.
Okay, and I like the fact that you're able to go with the conditional on that. Bill is in Trenton on Coast to Coast AM for Billy Carson. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, gentlemen. I have 3 quick comments. My hypothesis about Mars is that, being a retired teacher anyway, that Mars had the same orbit as Earth. That's why there's life on Mars. Second, the Bible was written 2,000 years ago under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Third, I do believe that the pyramids were constructed with the help of the Atlanteans. And they are in direct alignment with the Orion, according to the book written by Rodolfo Benavides. And also, they have been watching us ever since the atomic bombs were exploded. And I'll take my answers off the air. Thank you, gentlemen.
Billy?
Okay. Yeah, well, it seemed like three statements. I respect your opinion on those things. It seems like, three statements that you're really passionate about. The Atlanteans watching us, I totally believe that. It was just one of the things I said. the biblical text. That's something that's a whole other podcast for sure. I've done many lectures and podcasts on that topic. That's another show. But I definitely respect your opinion on that and your belief system on that as well. And this topic is just a huge topic because the Black Knight was doing exactly what I wanted it to do. I wanted it to raise questions and get people talking again about this thing, because the last viewing of it was in 2015. Two independent photographers happened to take a picture of it in different parts of the world. So something is still up there. What is it? Nobody really knows, but I'm just glad that people are starting to look into it. I'm glad for this show to give people an opportunity to hear about it again, and maybe everyone start digging in and doing a little bit more research.
Roy is in South Carolina on Coast to Coast AM. Go ahead, Roy.
Yeah, good morning. Just a quick digression on that Bunker City.
Yeah.
I'm a fairly big gamer. That sounds awfully close to like the vaults from the Fallout series, where they have underground cities for nuclear fallout. That it seemed dangerously close to me. But onto the Black Knight
but the difference is this is real, right?
Yeah, obviously.
Right. Okay, go ahead.
But on the Black Knight satellite, given that it's up there sending and possibly receiving signals with a mass of 15 tons, who's to say that this could not also be a sort of fail-safe to where if we reach a point where they consider critical, like dangerous, they could send the signal to drop it on Earth, and that would certainly do it a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got a good point there. It's one of the points that that I also considered, the fact that an advanced civilization, how would they, if they wanted to take over a planet, how would they do it? Well, with that object there, maybe potentially monitoring, not for sure, but potentially monitoring if something that they feel, that they deem is unworthy of us being able to be space traveling citizens, or maybe we've gone too far with some of our own detrimental technologies and with military. The best way to take over the planet would be just to release a toxin in the upper atmosphere, and within a few months, everybody's gone, and you come back and you have a completely intact planet with no more humans on it. I don't think they would come guns a-blazing. I don't think they would come shooting laser beams like they do in the movies. I think that's archaic, and I think that's like low-tech. I think the easiest thing to do would just release something in the atmosphere or in a water supply and just watch everybody go down, and then come down and clean up the mess and start fresh. But I do believe that, it's a possibility that they haven't touched this thing is because they could be afraid of it. There could be a mechanism, a self-defense mechanism that could be activated once it's approached. Nobody knows. So my personal opinion, the best thing to do is just leave it alone.
I did get a tweet from somebody who follows it pretty closely, I guess, and they said that the rods from God thing, that research, that theoretical exploration of that, it was too cost prohibitive to get something that big, that heavy off the ground, and so he said that it's no longer in consideration. I just thought I'd pass it along. Billy's
that's what I would say too if I didn't want people to know it was up there.
Yeah, okay, but I guess we can kind of do that all day long, right? I mean, where is the horizon line of truth ever then if it's just based on what we think? I don't know. I kind of like to have more than that, but I'm a journalist by nature. So we'll come back then. Last half hour on Coast to Coast. Your questions. You be engaged with Billy Carson and the Black Knight satellite. Sorry, I keep saying that. Black Knight satellite documentary, which we've got linked up at coasttocoastam.com. This is Ian Punnett. Alexis in Texas on Coast to Coast AM. Alexis?
Yes, sir.
Hi, you're talking with Billy Carson. Go ahead.
Hi there. So I was late to tuning into the show, but I was just curious if you were familiar with Edgar Casey's readings and if any of that might have been included in your research.
Oh, that's a great question. Edgar Casey was an amazing person. We looked into some of his research, but we didn't include any of it in the documentary. However, he did have reference to advanced beings from space, and as well as some type of technology potentially underneath the Sphinx and many other incredible things, but we just didn't utilize it. Only reason why is because we were trying to get people that we can talk to that had some either sources or some firsthand knowledge, and we couldn't get a hold of anybody from there that can give us any insight.
How much time have you spent studying utopian movements in the United States, or the colonies that came here with the same kind of utopian ideals of we're all going to work together, there's no central authority, we all will share in our self-governance, all of that?
Yeah, looked into it a lot, actually. I mean, a lot of them have actually obviously failed. There's no guarantee that this will prosper. But it's just something I thought I'd do, because it doesn't have to be used for a global disaster or a war. It can be used for, imagine if the people of Hurricane Katrina could have went there and had a safe, comfortable place and dry bed, fresh water, food, and everything else to drink and eat while their city was being, taken care of or whatever. I don't even know whatever happened to that city, to be honest with you. Probably had to rebuild everything. But a place to go temporarily. I mean, it could be a temporary disaster that can happen that can force people out of their homes. It could be Tornado Alley could go through and rip up, 100 houses and destroy families, and they need a place to stay. There's various different reasons for it. Also, I've been looking into utilizing it as a research facility to test what would happen if you put people down there. And so there's a couple of places that we've been talking with that are waiting on their grants to come through and so forth to be able to run those kind of research studies.
Well, to your point, I mean, Katrina, mostly the lower Ninth Ward and large parts of New Orleans having been wiped out by the storm surge and then going up around the Louisiana and then right around to past Christian and some of the other communities along that crescent of the Gulf, that those communities, if you had given people refuge, instead of them going to Houston or having them go, further up into like Monroe or something in Louisiana, if you had taken those people and you said, look, please come here on the condition that we're going to observe you and how well you do with these rules. And even though you didn't have a chance to weed anybody out or give them psychological examinations to determine who would be best to be living near each other, that would be some very compelling research, because then you could at least do sort of a shakedown cruise on what it would be like to get people as refugees, which would be part of what this would be for, as a refuge for when something bad happens topside on Earth, that at least it would give you some insight on how some refugees might act given a period of time underground.
Right. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
Billy is back, the guy in Peoria who has gone before to talk to Billy Carson on Coast to Coast.
I am so sorry, Ian. Thank you. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. In honor of Art Bell, Ian, thank you so much for being one of the best hosts on Coast to Coast AM. Mr. Carson, I was wondering, what is it? The X-22 that shuttlecraft that's been flying around space for 9 years now? What?
Yeah. X-30. You talking about the X-33 and the X-33B?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I was wondering if the whole reason why they launched that thing was to go try and chase down the Black Knight and see what it was doing.
It's an interesting thing. I actually looked into that potential. I had to evaluate all possibilities. Was this thing up there covertly observing the Black Knight and things like that? But what I found was something a little different. And just from some of my own sources from the military, it seems as if this thing, and it's top secret, so they can't tell me specifically what it's doing, but it seems as if this shuttle program, they're cargo ships. And they're unmanned cargo ships. They have the most advanced navigation system out of any shuttles that have ever existed. And I'm almost wondering if these things are doing trips back and forth from here to Mars, maybe dropping off some type of preliminary cargo that needs to be there for a military establishment. They wouldn't even tell us anyway. But there's got to be a reason why they're going up into space for 2 years at a time and things like that and then coming back. They announce the launch and announce the landing, but they don't tell you what's the cargo and where they've gone with that cargo. So it's pretty interesting.
You were wonderful with the callers, and I hope maybe even challenged on a couple other things as you move forward in your research. Billy Carson, again, link up to Billy through coasttocoastam.com. Good luck with Carson City, the underground Carson City. I swear to you, I'll be following that. I love that thought, and I think that it's neat that you're in charge of it. And I know you're not even saying like Emperor Billy. You're not gonna lord over it. You may not even make it, but the fact that you're building it is pretty cool. All right, I don't know when I'll be back. Thank you so much. Have a happy holiday, Billy, whatever it is that you celebrate. And then in the beginning of the new year, I'll be back again. To everybody else, in the meantime, drive carefully, be safe. Deus te amat, and I do too.
The Coast mobile app is now available for download on iPhones and Android devices. You can become an insider directly through this app. This is a great option for our international listeners, and new users will also receive a free 2-week trial.